The crystalline spires of Luminara University caught the binary sunset in a cascade of rainbow fractals. But Naya Voss was too nervous to appreciate the breathtaking view. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her datapad, following the floating holographic arrows toward Lecture Hall, Epsilon 7. 3 months into her exchange program on the moon Luminara, and she still felt like an imposter among the galaxy's brightest minds. "Breathe, Naya," she whispered to herself, her Earth-accented standard galactic drawing curious glances from passing students. A group of tall, elegant Zephyrians floated past on shimmering air currents, their opalescent skin catching the light like living prisms. She'd always been fascinated by xenolinguistics, but actually studying alongside alien species was proving more intimidating than she'd anticipated. The lecture hall buzzed with a symphony of different languages and communication methods. Naya found a seat in the middle section, not wanting to appear too eager by sitting in front or too disinterested by hiding in back. She unpacked her tools, a standard recorder, her grandmother's vintage paper notebook, and the translation earpiece that made interspecies education possible. "Welcome, students, to Advanced Harmonic Archaeology," announced Professor Yuki Sato, one of the few other humans on the faculty. Her voice carried easily through the hall's acoustic enhancement field. "Today we'll examine artifacts from the ethereal civilization, a species that communicated entirely through emotional resonance." Naya's interest piqued. She'd written her undergraduate thesis on emotional linguistics, arguing that feelings might be a universal language. Now she was about to see proof that an entire civilization had built their culture around that concept. "The ethereals vanished mysteriously 3 millennia ago," Professor Sato continued, "leaving behind only their resonance chambers and these." She gestured to a display case containing what looked like crystalline flowers, each one glowing softly with inner light. "Emotional resonators. We believe they were used for deep communication between bonded pairs." A student in the front row raised a graceful tentacle. Naya recognized her as Zara Nexus, a brilliant crystalline archaeologist who'd already published papers despite being only a year older than Naya herself. "Professor, have any of the resonators been successfully activated?" "Excellent question, Miss Nexus. In 3,000 years of study, no one has managed to awaken even one resonator. They appear to require a specific emotional frequency that we haven't been able to replicate." Naya leaned forward, studying the artifacts through the transparent aluminum of their case. There was something about their structure that reminded her of the electromagnetic poetry she'd studied on Earth, where emotions were translated into mathematical frequencies. The way the crystal formation spiraled reminded her of audio waveforms. "The ethereals believed that love was the fundamental force of the universe," Professor Sato continued. "Their entire technology was based on harnessing emotional energy. These resonators were supposedly given as gifts between soulmates, allowing them to share feelings across vast distances." A warm voice from the row behind Naya made her turn. "Imagine being able to feel exactly what your beloved feels," said a Zephyrian student with silver blue skin that seemed to shimmer like water. His large, luminous eyes met hers for a moment, and Naya felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. It would be the ultimate intimacy, or the ultimate invasion of privacy, countered a practical-sounding Altarian student, her crystalline face reflecting the lecture hall's lights like a prism. Naya found herself thinking about the silver-blue Zephyrian's words as Professor Sato opened the display case for closer examination. "We'll be working in pairs for today's analysis," the professor announced. "Please use only passive scanning. These artifacts are irreplaceable." The class began to pair off, and Naya felt the familiar anxiety of being chosen last. She was still the awkward human after all. But then the Zephyrian from behind her floated down to her row, moving with the characteristic grace of his species. "Would you like to be partners?" he asked, his accent musical in a way that made standard galactic sound like poetry. "I'm Cale Thorne. Energy harmonics specialist, Naya Voss, she replied, trying not to stare at the way the light played across his features. Xenolinguistics student from Earth. Perfect combination, Kale smiled. And Naya noticed that when Zephyrian smiled, their skin brightened subtly. Linguistics and harmonics should complement each other well. They approached one of the smaller resonators together, Kale's scanning device humming softly as it took readings. Naya found herself drawn to the artifact's structure, the way its crystalline petals seemed to fold in on themselves in an infinite regression. The mathematical progression is fascinating, she murmured, pulling out her grandmother's notebook to sketch the pattern. Look at how each layer relates to the next. It's like a physical manifestation of emotional crescendo. Kale paused his scanning to look at her sketch. You see it too, he said, wonder in his voice. The frequency cascade? My instruments are detecting it, but you're seeing it visually. Their hands brushed as she pointed to a detail in her drawing, and Naya felt a strange tingling sensation. The resonator in front of them pulsed once, so briefly she might have imagined it. Did you see that? Kale whispered. Before Naya could answer, Professor Sato's voice cut through the classroom chatter. Please remember, passive scanning only. We cannot risk damaging these priceless artifacts. But Naya was already reaching toward the resonator, drawn by an intuition she couldn't explain. The crystal felt warm under her fingertips, and she could swear she felt a rhythm pulsing within it, like a heartbeat made of light. Naya, what are you doing? Kale's voice seemed to come from far away. She pressed her palm flat against the resonator's central core, and suddenly the world exploded into sensation. Warmth flooded through her, not just physical but emotional, like being wrapped in the feeling of a perfect summer day. She could sense Kale's presence beside her, not just his physical form, but his essence, his curiosity and wonder, and the gentle kindness that seemed to be his default state. The resonator blazed to life, its crystalline petals unfolding in layers of light that painted the entire lecture hall in shifting rainbow hues. Harmonic tones filled the air, beautiful and complex, like a symphony played by angels. Impossible, Professor Sato breathed. Naya felt Kale's amazement as if it were her own emotion, a feedback loop of wonder that made the resonator glow even brighter. She could sense his heartbeat, his breath, the way her touch had sent electricity racing through his nervous system. And underneath it all, a deeper recognition, as if they had known each other in some previous existence. The entire class had gone silent, staring at the first ethereal resonator to awaken in 3 millennia. But Naya barely noticed them. She was lost in the sensation of perfect emotional synchronization, feeling Kale's consciousness intertwining with her own, like two melodies finding harmony. How? Kale whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Even without the resonator's effect, Naya would have been able to hear the awe in his tone. She looked up into his luminous eyes, seeing her own wonder reflected there, and realized that everything had just changed. The resonator continued to sing between them, a bridge built of light and feeling, connecting not just two minds, but two hearts across the vast divide of species and culture. I think, Naya said softly, her voice barely audible above the resonator's song, we just proved that love really is a universal language. The implications of what had just happened were staggering, but in that moment, all Naya could focus on was the warmth of Kale's presence in her mind and the way the ancient ethereal technology had recognized something in them that they were only beginning to understand themselves. The resonator's glow had faded to a gentle pulse by the time security arrived, but the emotional echo lingered in Naya's mind like the phantom touch of Kale's consciousness. She sat in the university's medical wing, staring at her hands while a concerned Altarian medic ran various scans over her neural pathways. Remarkable, the medic murmured, her crystalline fingers dancing over holographic readouts. Your brainwave patterns show traces of Zephyrian harmonic resonance. This should be biologically impossible. Naya barely heard her. 3 hours had passed since the resonator incident, and she could still feel Kale's presence like a warm song at the edge of her thoughts. When he was happy, she felt lighter. When anxiety crept into his mind during his own medical examination down the hall, her chest tightened in response. "Naya, there you are." Zara Nexus burst through the medical bay doors, her crystalline form refracting the sterile lighting into tiny rainbows. As Naya's roommate and closest friend on Luminara, Zara had been frantically searching for her since news of the incident spread. "The entire university is buzzing. They're saying you awakened an ethereal resonator on your first try. It wasn't intentional," Naya said quietly, finally looking up from her hands. "I just felt drawn to touch it." Zara's multifaceted eyes studied her friend with scientific curiosity mixed with concern. Crystalline beings were naturally empathic within their own species, so she could sense Naya's emotional turbulence, even without ethereal technology. What was it like? The connection? Before Naya could answer, the medical bay doors slid open again. Kale entered, moving with less than his usual fluid grace, his silver-blue skin slightly dimmed with exhaustion. Their eyes met across the room, and Naya felt that now familiar flutter of shared sensation. "Hello," he said softly, and in that single word, Naya heard volumes of unspoken communication. "Hello yourself," she replied, managing a small smile. Even that simple exchange sent ripples through their unusual bond, warmth cascading between them like gentle waves. Zara looked back and forth between them, her analytical mind cataloging the subtle signs of their connection. "Fascinating. You're exhibiting microsynchronization behaviors. Breathing patterns, pulse rates, even your bioluminescent responses are beginning to align. Is that ... bad?" Kale asked, settling into the chair beside Naya's examination table. His proximity made the resonance between them stronger, more defined. "Unknown," the Altarian medic interjected, saving her scan results to a secure database. "We have no previous cases to reference." The ethereals kept no records of how their resonator bonds affected different species. Interactions. The medical bay doors opened once more, admitting a figure that made all conversation cease. Finn Blackwood strode in, his Earth military bearing obvious despite wearing civilian clothes. Naya's childhood friend and former romantic interest had arrived on Luminara just that morning for a surprise visit, and his timing couldn't have been worse. "Naya," Finn said, his voice tight with concern, and something else Naya couldn't quite identify. "I came as soon as I heard about the accident. Are you hurt?" The moment Finn entered Naya's emotional field, Kale went rigid beside her. Through their bond, Naya felt his confusion and a sharp spike of something that might have been jealousy. The emotional feedback made her own feelings more intense, creating a cascade effect that left both of them struggling to process ... Finn, "What are you doing here?" Naya asked, standing up too quickly and immediately regretting it when the room spun slightly. "Steady," Kale murmured, his hand instinctively reaching out to support her elbow. The brief contact sent another pulse through their connection, and Finn's eyes narrowed as he noticed the intimate gesture. "I'm here to accompany the new cultural attach," Finn replied, his gaze never leaving Kale's hand on Naya's arm. "Imagine my surprise when I heard my oldest friend had become the subject of a xenoarchaeological incident." Zara, ever the diplomat, stepped forward with her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Perhaps we should all take a moment to process what's happened. Finn, Naya has just experienced something unprecedented in galactic history. Kale, your species has natural empathic tendencies, so you might understand better than most what they're both going through." But Kale was struggling with emotions he'd never experienced before. Zephyrians were naturally peaceful, resolving conflicts through harmonic meditation and consensus building. This sharp, possessive feeling was entirely foreign to his psychology. made worse by the fact that he could sense Naya's conflicted emotions about Finn through their bond. "How long have you two known each other?" Cale asked, trying to keep his voice neutral and failing entirely. "Since we were children," Finn replied, moving closer to Naya in a gesture that was clearly territorial. "We grew up together on Earth, dated through most of university." Naya felt Cale's emotional withdrawal like a physical blow, the warmth that had sustained her for the past 3 hours suddenly flickering. "Finn, that's not. We're not ... double quotes. Not what?" Finn pressed. "Not important to each other?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like some alien technology has scrambled your brain, and everyone's just accepting it as normal." The Altarian medics, crystalline features sharpened with disapproval. "The resonator technology is not scrambling anything. It appears to be creating a genuine empathic link between compatible consciousness frequencies." "Compatible?" Finn's laugh was bitter. "She's human." He single quotes S ... not. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Naya felt Cale's pain as acutely as her own. Through their bond, she experienced his lifetime of subtle discrimination. The way other species sometimes viewed Zephyrians as too emotional, too ethereal to be taken seriously in academic settings. "That's enough," Naya said firmly, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. "Finn, I appreciate your concern, but you don't get to dismiss what I'm experiencing just because it doesn't fit your worldview." She turned to face Cale, whose luminous eyes were clouded with hurt. Without thinking, she reached for his hand, and the moment their fingers touched, the resonance between them flared back to full strength. The relief was overwhelming for both of them, like finally being able to breathe after holding their breath underwater. "The connection isn't going away," Zara observed, her scientific fascination overriding social awkwardness. "If anything, it's strengthening. Separation causes distress, while proximity enhances the bond." Finn's expression darkened. "So what? She's addicted to this alien now." "It's not addiction," Naya said quietly, but her voice carried an unmistakable certainty. "It's recognition." Cale's fingers tightened around hers, and through their bond, she felt his gratitude and wonder. Despite his species' natural empathic abilities, he'd never experienced anything like the crystalline clarity of their connection. With Naya, he didn't have to translate his emotions into harmonic frequencies or worry about cultural misunderstandings. She simply knew what he felt, as he knew her. Recognition of what? The Altarian medic asked. Her professional curiosity engaged. NAI looked at Cale, seeing her own certainty reflected in his luminous eyes. "That some connections transcend biology," she said softly. "The ethereals understood something we've forgotten. Love isn't bound by species or culture. It's a frequency that exists independent of physical form." Finn shook his head in disbelief. "Naya, listen to yourself. You've known this ... person for 3 hours. You can't possibly believe you're in love." But even as he spoke, Naya knew with absolute certainty that time was irrelevant. The resonator hadn't created feelings between her and Cale. It had simply revealed what was already there, waiting to be discovered. Through their bond, she could sense Cale's entire emotional history, his dreams and fears, and the deep loneliness he'd carried despite being surrounded by his own kind. "How long does it take to recognize home?" she asked Finn, never taking her eyes off Cale. The Zephyrian's skin brightened with emotion, and Naya felt his overwhelming sense of rightness, as if a puzzle piece he'd been searching for his entire life had finally clicked into place. Zara, meanwhile, was rapidly taking notes on her datapad. "This is revolutionary," she murmured. If the resonator technology could be safely replicated, it could transform interspecies relations. Imagine the diplomatic applications alone, or the military ones, Finn said grimly. Emotional manipulation on a species-wide scale. His words sent a chill through the room, and Naya realized for the first time that their personal miracle might have implications far beyond their own happiness. Through their bond, she felt Cale's sudden anxiety as the same thought occurred to him. "We need to be careful," Cale said quietly. "If the wrong people learn about this technology, they already know," Sarah replied, showing them her datapad screen. "The university has classified the incident as a Level 7 archaeological discovery. That means government involvement within hours." Naya's heart sank as she realized their precious connection might become a tool for politicians and military strategists. But then Cale's hand squeezed hers, sending a pulse of determination through their bond. "Whatever happens," he said, meeting her eyes, "we face it together." And despite the uncertainty ahead, Naya found herself smiling. Because through the resonator's gift, she knew with absolute certainty that Cale meant every word, and that together they might be strong enough to protect what they'd found from those who would exploit it. Chancellor Vera Salas swept into the secured conference room like a storm front, her Altarian crystalline form refracting the harsh fluorescent lights into sharp, cold angles. Behind her followed a retinue of officials that made Naya's stomach clench with anxiety: university administrators, government liaisons, and most ominously, a pair of military strategists whose presence suggested this meeting was about far more than academic. "Discovery. Sit," Vera commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. The single word echoed off the conference room's soundproof walls. Naya found herself seated between Cale and Zara, while Finn had positioned himself across the table where he could watch every interaction. The resonator bond meant she could feel Cale's nervous energy as clearly as her own, their emotions creating a feedback loop that made it difficult to think clearly. 12 hours ago, Chancellor Salas began, activating a holographic display that showed the awakened resonator in all its glowing glory. This university became home to the most significant archaeological discovery in galactic history. The implications are staggering. Juno Reed, the human cultural attaché who had arrived with Finn, leaned forward with barely concealed excitement. Her diplomatic training couldn't quite hide her acquisitive gleam as she studied the hologram. "Chancellor, if this technology could be replicated and distributed, imagine the diplomatic breakthroughs. Species that have been at odds for millennia could achieve perfect understanding, or perfect manipulation," Vera replied coldly. "Emotional resonance works both ways," attaché Reed. "The same technology that enables empathy could be weaponized for psychological warfare." Cale's distress spiked through their bond, and Naya felt his horror at the thought of their beautiful connection being twisted into an instrument of harm. She reached for his hand under the table, their fingers intertwining as the resonance between them pulsed stronger. "With respect, Chancellor," Zara interjected, her crystalline features brightening with intellectual passion, "we shouldn't assume malicious applications. The ethereals used this technology for thousands of years without any historical evidence of warfare or coercion." One of the military strategists, a stern-faced Tellurian with metallic skin, snorted dismissively. The ethereals also mysteriously vanished, leaving no trace of their civilization beyond these trinkets. Perhaps their trusting nature led to their extinction. The words hit Naya like a physical blow. Through their bond, she felt Cale's anguish at the implication that their connection might somehow be dangerous or doomed. The resonator's influence meant his pain became hers, amplifying until tears pricked at her eyes. "You're wrong," she said quietly, but her voice carried in the suddenly silent room. "The connection isn't about control or manipulation. It's about truth. When you can feel someone else's genuine emotions, deception becomes impossible." Chancellor Salas's multifaceted eyes fixed on Naya with uncomfortable intensity. "And therein lies the problem, Miss Voss. Your bond with Mr. Thorne has been active for less than 24 hours, yet you speak with the certainty of someone who has studied this technology for decades. How do we know you're still thinking clearly?" How do we know this alien influence hasn't compromised your judgment? The accusation stung, because Naya had wondered the same thing herself. But through the bond, she could sense Cale's unwavering integrity, his commitment to protecting others, even at personal cost. If the resonator was influencing her judgment, it was only to reveal truths she might have otherwise missed. "My judgment is fine," she replied firmly. "Better than fine, actually. I can sense lies now, emotional manipulation, hidden agendas." Her gaze swept the room, noting how several officials shifted uncomfortably. "It's remarkably clarifying." Finn leaned forward, his expression troubled. "Naya, you're talking about reading minds. That's a massive violation of privacy, not to mention potentially dangerous if you're wrong about someone's intentions." "It's not mind reading." Cale spoke for the first time since entering the room, his musical voice carefully controlled despite the storm of emotions Naya could feel through their bond. "It's emotional resonance. We sense feelings, not thoughts. And it only works because we single quotes compatible." The word hung in the air with implications that made several officials exchange meaningful glances. Vara Salas made a note on her datapad, and Naya realized with growing dread that their personal connection was being analyzed as data. Compatible how? Juno Reed pressed. "What made the two of you specifically able to activate ethereal technology when no one else has succeeded in 3 millennia? Naya felt Cale's reluctance to answer, his protective instinct warring with the need for honesty. Through their bond, she sensed his fear that whatever made them special would be dissected, replicated, and exploited. "We don't know," Naya lied smoothly. The truth was more complex. She suspected their compatibility had to do with complementary emotional frequencies, the way her human intuition meshed with his Zephyrian empathic abilities. But some instinct warned her to keep that insight private. Vera Salas's crystalline features sharpened. "Miss Voss, need I remind you that this is a formal investigation? Withholding information serves no one." "With respect, Chancellor," Zara interjected, "they've been bonded for less than a day. Expecting them to understand complex psychological phenomena is unrealistic." The military strategist who had spoken earlier activated his own holographic display, showing detailed scans of the resonator's energy patterns. "Our preliminary analysis suggests the device responds to specific brainwave configurations. If we could identify and replicate those patterns. No." The word came from both Naya and Cale simultaneously, their voices harmonizing in a way that made the resonator itself pulse visibly on the conference room's monitoring screen. Chancellor Salas raised one crystalline hand for silence. "I'm afraid this is no longer a matter of personal preference. The University Council has voted to place both of you under protective academic custody while we study this phenomenon." "Custody?" Naya's voice cracked with disbelief. "You mean imprisonment?" "You mean separation," Cale added, and Naya felt his growing panic through their bond. Being apart from each other had become physically uncomfortable. Being forcibly separated might be genuinely harmful. Finn straightened in his chair, his protective instincts finally overriding his jealousy. "You can't detain a galactic citizen without charges or due process." "Naya has rights." "Miss Voss activated dangerous alien technology without authorization," Vera replied coolly. "That's sufficient grounds for protective custody under university security protocols." Juno Reed nodded in agreement. "And Mr. Thorne's cooperation would be appreciated. This technology could revolutionize interspecies relations. Surely he wants to contribute to galactic peace, but Naya could feel Cale's revulsion at the thought of their private connection being turned into a political tool. His emotional recoil sent waves of nausea through their bond, making her grip the table edge for stability. "You don't understand," Naya said desperately. "The separation causes physical distress. Whatever this bond is, Breaking it could be harmful to both of us. All the more reason for careful study. The military strategist replied with clinical detachment. We need to understand the full implications before allowing this phenomenon to spread. Spread. The word sent chills through both Naya and Kale. They were being treated like a contagion rather than individuals who had found an extraordinary connection. Zara, who had been quietly analyzing data on her personal device, suddenly looked up with alarm. Chancellor, the resonator's energy output has increased by 30% since the meeting began. Emotional stress appears to amplify its effects. The room's monitoring equipment confirmed Zara's observation with increasingly frantic beeping. The resonator, still secured in the archaeology department, was glowing brighter than ever before, its harmonic emissions growing stronger by the minute. Fascinating, Vera Salas murmured, but her tone suggested fascination of the scientific rather than humanitarian variety. It appears the device responds to the subject's emotional state even at a distance. We're not subjects, Naya snapped, her patience finally fraying. We're people. And this isn't just some artifact to be studied. It's a bridge between two hearts that chose to connect despite every obstacle. Resonator's pulse visible on the monitoring screen grew stronger, and somewhere in the distance, they could hear the device itself humming audibly through the building's walls. Kale stood abruptly, his usual graceful composure cracking under the pressure of hostile scrutiny and forced separation anxiety. You want to study us like specimens in a laboratory, but you don't understand what you're dealing with. The ethereals built this technology on love, not fear. Approaching it with suspicion and control will only corrupt its purpose. His words seemed to strike a chord somewhere in the building's structure. Lights flickered, and the resonator's distant song grew momentarily louder before settling into a rhythm that sounded almost like a heartbeat. Chancellor Salas stood as well, her crystalline form rigid with authority. Emotional appeals aside, the decision has been made. You will both be relocated to separate secure facilities within the hour. No, Naya said, rising to face the Chancellor. Through their bond, she felt Kale's resolve strengthening her own, their connection creating a feedback loop of determination. We refuse. This isn't optional, Vera replied coldly. Then you'll have to drag us apart, Kale said quietly, moving to stand beside Naya. Their hands found each other automatically, and the moment they touched, the resonator's song grew so loud it could be heard clearly through the conference room walls. Sound was beautiful and heartbreaking, and defiant all at once, a melody that spoke of love refusing to be caged, of hearts that had found their home in each other despite all the reasons they shouldn't have. For a moment, everyone in the room fell silent, listening to the impossible music that their connection had awakened from 3 millennia of slumber. Then Chancellor Salas activated her communicator. Security to conference room, Alpha 7. Prepare for resistant subjects. But as footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, Naya looked into Kale's luminous eyes and knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The resonator had shown them something the officials couldn't understand, that some forces in the universe were stronger than politics, stronger than fear, stronger even than the laws that sought to contain them. Their love had awakened something ancient and powerful, and no amount of academic authority could put that song back to sleep.